And if I had to summarize what the theme is for today's webinar, I think this is the way I do it. I think that finding a balance and balancing is really about being data savvy, and at a bare minimum you have to be data aware. So I hope that, although some of you disagreed that your institutions aren't really using data to make important marketing decisions, I hope that you're at least data aware. I hope there's at least some collection going on, and if so, rest assured that's the first step to becoming data savvy. So, I think you guys are probably on the right track. Nobody strongly disagreed, which is really good. But again, ideally, thinking about this analogy of balancing, I'd say the idea of balancing isn't about let's climb up on a ledge for a second and stay there as long as we can until we fall off the edge of the cliff to oblivion. Now, the idea is we want to get on a ledge that's comfortable, and we want to start somewhere comfortable. And the only way we're going to know that is by knowing the data sort of around the activities that we do. And with time, as the data gets better and we get more data, we can go on narrower and narrower ledges, and we can feel more comfortable on that. So what that really means is it's about a process too. It's about a data-rich process that we really need. Hopefully that we don't have to think about too much, but that's what we're going for. And that's really what I'm going to try and talk to you guys today. It's really the idea I want to hammer into everybody is that it's about having good processes. It's all going to be driven from our perspective from the ROI. It's going to be the main driver of this process approach, which is a much more interesting metric than I think people give it credit for. A lot of organizations track it, but don't necessarily know the real value that's inside of the ROI. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and why ROI is so important. Of course, that being said, you can use other other marketing metrics as well, depending on goals for your organization. If your goal isn't a revenue-generating organization, if your concern is really headcount, registration count, you can easily replace ROI with other metrics as well. The second bit is it's the reason why it's a process is we need to be continuously improving. And the second and the third point are really kind of the same concept, but I wanted to post those differently. The reason why it's a process for continuous improvement is because, as we've learned in the last year, as the market has changed, we need to be more and more agile and responsive to what happens. We need to be more responsive to the needs of our customers, and we need to be more responsive to a catastrophe as it occurs. And the only way to do this is to really have a well-oiled machine that's changing all of the time. And happily today, the smart mailing list that I get to at the end is a great way to protect yourself as much as you can from things like recessions, and also to capitalize on a lot of economic growth. So I'm here to tell you that it's all going to be pretty good and exciting. So I thought about characterizing some of the problems that I try to address in assisting our marketing team, and this is kind of what I came up with: a terrified woman who's everything's just going wrong. She just can't figure anything out. We don't know how much we should send. We don't know who we should send them to. We don't know how much we need to spend on all of these efforts. What is the budget that we should allot to this particular activity? And the last question, which I think is really interesting, is how can we spend less and make more? And that's really about the efficiency I was talking about. That's what's really important to me in my role, and that's what I spend a lot of time thinking about, is how can we not spend so much and still do a better job of what we're trying to do. And for most of us, I think that finding that balance means spending less on catalogs, getting more out of those catalogs, but also being able to take that extra revenue and spend it on more aggressive email campaigns. Whether that's the case, it really shouldn't matter, though. We're going to go over this in a kind of theoretical way that should apply the other direction as well. Well, I'd like to move on to talk a little bit about the experts. So the first approach, I think, in just about any problem in the pursuit of any solution is to look at the experts and see if there's people out there who just know a lot that we can ask good questions of, and see if they can really help us find a solution. And I've kind of thought about this as a boxing round, a boxing match. I don't have any clip art for everybody, although I did search for some. I didn't find any that was high quality enough for my taste. But we're going to do this in rounds anyway. So every round is a question. We're going to start with round number one, and the question is about data-driven cultures. And the question is, how rigorously are people really measuring those important marketing metrics? And it's tough to get an answer to this question without asking somebody who could survey. And unfortunately, in our industry, in continuing education and adult education, it's not possible to find people who even think about this enough to consider running this type of survey. But this is what we have. We have some marketing professionals who ran a survey of various marketing departments. And what they found was that 88% of their respondents said that they did some measurement of some of their activities. They did some kind of measurement, which is funny to me. It sounds like it's a good number, but you got to wonder what the other 12% are doing to justify what their marketing departments are running. How are they justifying those budgets is completely beyond me. But they also learned that of all the people that they asked, only 52% of them measure at least half of their activities. And for the last point, I just wanted to say, ouch. That doesn't sound too terrifying, but what that really means, if we change that into layman's terms, forget the percentage for a moment, that means that half of the time we have no idea how well our marketing is working. Half of the time that we spend marketing products and services in here, we just have no idea the return that we're getting on them. We have no idea if they're good investments or not. We just sort of gauge by general success that our marketing must be working, and we just kind of let it fly. And I'm here to tell you that that's not a good way to think about it. And I think that we know this, and I can tell you these the marketingprof.com would agree with me. It's just not the right way to think about marketing. We need to be measuring as much as we can, and we need to make it as easy as possible. And that may be the biggest hurdle for most of us, but that's kind of the gist of that. So I think we can get a lot out of what some marketing surveys have said about cross industry marketing departments. And more than likely in our industry, for our departments, it's probably a little bit worse than the average, which is sad. But I know we're all making giant steps in the right direction. Well, the second question is this, and I think this question is a little silly, but that's okay. The question is it more important to focus on online or printed materials? Now, I think it's silly, but unfortunately there's at least a couple of expert organizations out there that don't think it's a silly question. And you have some of them that fervently argue that printed materials are the way to go. And in this corner, making this argument, we have Learn from the Learn knowledge base. They say the printed brochure generates 75% of income in our industry. And that probably is true. And the problem that I have with that is that they make the argument that that means that we shouldn't be spending so much time on things like the website, and we shouldn't be spending so much time on things like email. But the problem isn't that simple, and I think the third question is going to make that pretty clear. And in the other corner, of course, we have my own alma mater. One might say that the website at Emory is responsible for 75% of enrollments, which is also true. And the problem here is, of course, how do we cope with this information? The real question was, is it more important to focus on online or in printed materials? And here we have two good experts who are probably telling us the truth. And just by looking at these statements, it's really easy to come to completely opposite conclusions. The problem here is, of course, is while we're measuring percentages and we're using numbers and this is good data that we're looking at here, the problem is we're not really comparing apples to apples. And what we need is a metric that we can use as our vernacular for communicating what is a good effort and what isn't a good effort. And ROI, I think, is probably the best choice, although, as I mentioned, there are some others that you could use as well. But the important thing is we need to be able to communicate both internally with our teams, across our teams, and even with other organizations in our industry, what we think are good activities, and we need to be able to justify to ourselves and to each other what are good activities. The only way to do that, of course, is with something like a vernacular metric like the ROI. And here's the next question. This one's going to be the most fun, I promise. The question is, should we send out more emails or should we send out more brochures? I believe both of these icons are meant to represent emails, but bear with me here. The @ sign is the email, and the little letter is a brochure, and we're going to use these symbols to help us go through this.